You can take the boys out of the city, but you can never plug a dam in Denmark with your thumb. Intrepid Radio, with a haphazardly focused Scotty Roberts and the rollicking, adventurous Dr. John Ward. Sticking their fingers in the hole in the dike of humanity.
Scotty Roberts. I'm here with Dr. John Ward, my cohort over there on the Nile River. Well, actually, you're not on the Dahabea now. You just finished your season, didn't you?
I did indeed, brother. I'm sat here in the comfy of my office.
There's an ambiance about having you on here when you're on the boat.
I'm
down
sorry.
At Cabo El Silsila, but certainly...
There's no ambience in my office.
If you could go sit in the bathtub next week, that would be awfully nice. Grant us a little ambience.
Well, I tell you what, for the Situation Room on Thursday night, just for the ambience, I might go and sit on the bottom terrace of the Temple of Dea Bahari.
Oh, now that would be nice. Hatshepsut's temple over there. That's like 5 minutes from your house. We've got our guest, Fritz Zimmerman, here with us. And Fritz, we've been talking about a lot of stuff around the finds, about the controversies around the finds and so on. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about that spiritual side, or the religious side, the mythological side of what you're talking about, because while you're talking about these Indian mounds and the giant skeletons and these different discoveries and so on, your site is, after all, called the Nephilim Chronicles, your books, and you talk about fallen angels in the Ohio Valley. So now, is this what you attribute the mound work to? Are these beings? Is this the thing that is different from the paradigm that exists?
Oh, yeah. The Nephilim, and basically we're just saying giants. And we know from the book of Enoch that story says that these giants were given the secrets from the sons of God. And I line those secrets up with the Amorites and Babylon, that all of a sudden we knew math. All of a sudden we were following the course of the moon and the sun, and we learned how to make metals. And all those things that are listed in the book of Enoch, we can take, and then we can look at the Ohio Valley and go, yeah, they were doing all these things. These are the secrets, including mathematics, and including advanced mathematics of pi and square root, and using a base 12 duodecimal number system that we still use today. That when you look at a clock and you see 12, you're looking at the ancient Amorites. And when you look at a foot, you're looking at the ancient Amorites. And then the evidence that they were using the foot, whether they called it a foot, but the measurements in the Ohio Valley are based on a numerical codex called Gematria, which means earth measures, but the core numbers of that was 666 for the sun, and 1080 was the number for the moon. And
what does that mean?
Times that shows up. That was the designate numbers, that the number 666, and there's things called the magic square from the Amorites of, moving things, and 111, and in the Bible in Genesis 11:1, when it says, and now the world had one language, they were in reference to this Gematria Codex. That's why 11:1, 111, which we can go to 666. But there's evidence in the Bible of Gematria also, of how that number was used. 666 we know from Revelations. However, it's used two other times. Once with Adonacham, once with Solomon. They bring Solomon 666 talons of gold. 666 was the number for the sun. Solomon, Salaman, means sun 3 different ways. So there's more reference to 666 being sun in the Bible than, being the Antichrist. Actually, that says count the number of the beast. Let you have understanding, count the number. Understand that you have to count. What we're talking about, who was persecuting the Christians? It was the Romans. If we count the numbers of the Roman numerical system, 500, 150, 1051, we get 666. That's a reference to Rome. And in 2 other cases in the Bible, it's referred to as a number for the sun. Now we go to Ohio Valley. We have all these sun temples that are either 660 or 666 feet in circumference. The sacred geometry, the circle was the sun. The square, the 4 winds, was the earth mother. All the squares in Ohio, surprisingly, 1080 feet. What are the odds of that happening? We have another henge in Lexington and another one that showed up in Charleston that were 555 feet. And if you take 555.5 and divide it by pi, you get 1746, which is a sum total of 666 plus 1080. Well, what are the chances of all these numbers coming together from a people, the Amorites, that were giants, and now all these temples in the Ohio Valley seem to go along with the numerical codex that they laid out? Gematria.
I got to tell you, there's something very Pythagorean about it all, and I don't get any of it because I'm going to say like Barbie said while twisting her hair around her finger. Math is hard.
Can I just
don't
ask a
do
question?
math, so
I just want to ask a question here, Fritz. So you're saying that the Amorites that came over to the Ohio Valley were not only mathematical geniuses, not only did they take 5 million tons of copper back with them, but they were giants as well.
Yes.
And where are the giant skeleton remains in Babylon or Iraq?
That would be interesting. Do they have this?
Well, they describe them, of course, in the Bible as being large.
But where's the archaeological evidence?
Well, they found a skull in 1920 at the gates of Damascus in Jerusalem, described as massive. That was actually a generic type skull. Generic actually has the back of the head is flattened, and we find those around Stonehenge. We found them in Northern Europe. Actually, at the turn of the century, when they were finding those, they actually thought they were Peruvian skulls because that was the only link they knew of other skulls that kind of look like that.
Where's the for the skeleton matter?
Yeah, they found the one at the gates of Damascus. I don't know over there if they had found it.
They found one skull from an entire race of beings, so you say, that were able to traverse the great seas of the planet, take their math with them to build all these wonderful things and take all the copper and so forth, but there's no archaeological evidence of them ever existing.
Wow, what the perfect argument of the guy of citing the group that hides all the evidence and go, well, where's your evidence? It's like, yeah, I'm not in control of the Smithsonian. I'm not in control of the museums over there in England and what the hell they did with all those skeletons. And then denying and then hiding all of them and going, where's your proof? And it's like, yeah, give me the key and I'll find them. Give me the key to the Smithsonian and I'll give you the proof. So where are they? Well, let's just go what we do have. We do have the hinges. We do have the mounds with the circles. We do have the skulls in the Ohio Valley. We do have the numerology. We do have advanced mathematics. We know those earthworks in the Ohio Valley were built using the knowledge of pi and square roots.
That's the evidence I have.
Let's talk about the evidence that I have, not something that we don't have because it's being hidden by academia.
But it's not being hidden.
That I hate getting into.
There's nothing suppressed. That's the point I want to get to, Fritz. Where's the skeleton matter?
That is the academic bullshit that I've been dealing with for the last 10 years.
But there is nothing that is being suppressed.
I will tell you this. There's something about all of this that even I, who've written about these things from a less technical standpoint, more from, like I said, the religious mythological standpoint, there is something about this that I have bought into a long time ago as well, and that is the academic suppression. But I'm becoming less convinced that that exists the more research I do. There is nothing better than being able to say, I wish this were so. But I start to get a little afraid that we have no proof of suppression other than to label it as a conspiracy. And I mean that with due respect, Fritz, because I'm not trying to take you to task on that point other than to say I've been down that route. And it just seems to me that you're going to get, I've had so much argument with people over academic issues, people in academia about certain things I bring up that are not academic or not fitting into the academic nomenclature or the academic paradigm, that it seems to me that if these things existed, they would want them out in the open and they would argue about it. And if they disagreed with you, they'd tell you, they'd blow you off, in other words. They would tell you how wrong you are and hold up that skull and say it's something absolutely different.
They're not. They will not get into an argument with me about the skull types found in the Ohio Valley. And I can tell you this. I sent a photo, and I don't have an email now, so I'm not going to say his name, but the leading anthropologist in this country. And I sent him a skull from a mound in Ohio. And I asked him what the racial identity of that skull was. And I said, what's the racial affinity? And he said, Caucasian. And then I told him where it came from. And he did the hibbity-dibbity and said, I retract what I said about that. Now, you want to ask me about evidence. Well, there is evidence. And they will not get in a debate with me about these skull types. And they will not get into a debate of why we have hinges in the Ohio Valley and we have hinges in England, and why we have conical mounds with circles around them in England and we have them here, and the skull types match, and they are using gematria, and they were using advanced mathematics. And then I give all this 357 pages of evidence that these people were here, and then somebody asks me, where's your evidence? It's like, read my book.
Well, it's not that. I'm not disagreeing with you on the hinges.
Oh, my God,
no
I
one's
can't
disagreeing
believe
with
that
you
all
on
of this
this,
is here and that we didn't know about it.
Fritz,
but I'll get into a conversation with somebody
no one is arguing or
so-called
disagreeing with you
academic,
with
and they're
regards to
going to say,
hinges.
where's your evidence? It's like, here's a book. Here's all the evidence that they were here. So don't ask me, like, well, where's your skull or where's your skeleton and where's your – it's like, well, there's evidence all around us. But deny that and then go to, well, where's your evidence?
A book is not evidence. Give me skeleton matter. Give me archaeological evidence that I can actually see, test, and feel. That's evidence, not a book. A book is not evidence without it being backed up with physical evidence, not photographs off the internet.
Evidence, you can go to the airport and measure it. You can measure it and tell me why is that 666 feet. Tell me why a square is 10
That
feet.
is not a
Why
skeleton.
that
is not skeleton remains, Fritz. What I'm asking you for is the backup of your theory that the Ammonites were giants that traversed the seas. Give me evidence of these people, this race of people, a race of people. Give me the evidence. Where is it? Where are they buried? Where
Do
are
you
the
know
tombs?
where these things are housed now? Where can we find this stuff? Where can it be examined?
Well, if you read my book, there are over 100 cases where they found a large skeleton, and then it was reported that the Smithsonian Institute was en route to get the skeleton. They came. If the Smithsonian found out there was a large skeleton out there, they sent agents to go get it. Now, I have 100 historical accounts of the Smithsonian getting on trains and buggies and going to the most remote parts of the United States to go get a skeleton that was reported in a newspaper or in a county history. And let me ask you, if those are all hoaxes, why would they go 100 times to go get these skeletons? They would go about 3 and go, no, they're all hoaxes. It's like, no, 100 times they went. So they gobbled up all those skeletons, and then somebody says, well, where are all the skeletons? Well, let me just give you the reports where I know the Smithsonian went 100 times to go get them, and they wouldn't have gone all those times if they were all hoaxes.
You're talking about 100 times in America. You're saying that the Ammonites came from the Levant, from the Middle East. Where are the skeleton remains in the Middle East?
That is a big question.
Well, as you know, one, there's dolmens. They're all over the Jordan River on the east side, exactly where the Bible said the Amorites lived, but those skeletons are long gone. You see the dolmen, you'll see the two stones, but the burial mound that encased them is long gone.
So
how many ancient skeletons?
An entire race has just disappeared. An entire race, an entire civilization of giants has just
How many Bronze Age skeletons are they finding in Israel today? How many? How many skeletons from 3000 BC are they finding along the Jordan River today?
I don't know. How many?
So what are we going to say, that the Jews weren't in Israel because they haven't found the bones yet from Bronze Age, that people at Abraham's time didn't exist because they haven't found the bones? Really?
You're looking at apples and oranges there, because you're looking at Semitic peoples that just littered the whole landscape over there. If they were Abraham's people
Where's their bones? You're making claims that Hebrews were over in Israel in the Bronze Age? Where are their bones?
Well,
Where's Abraham's
you
bones?
can certainly find skeletal remains.
I can make the arguments that the Hebrews weren't there because you don't have any skeletal matter.
Well, all I'm saying by that, all I'm saying that
these ancient people of Jews, where's your skeletons?
Well, all I'm saying about that, Fritz, is that
it's an absolute ridiculous argument. Where's your skeletons? I provide etymology, language that came over here. Why was it that the Algonquins and the Iroquois were calling their chiefs Og when it's a Hebrew word for chief? And there's a lot other more words that the Native Americans were using that were Semitic. Layers of evidence. And you're going to have to go, where's your skeleton? Where's your skeleton?
I know what we should do. We should rewrite history based on your book.
Well,
it is rewriting history.
The question I was trying to get at was this, is that you can find skeletal remains in the Middle East from 3000 BC. They're there. The difference being is that when John is asking where are the skeletal remains of the giants, do we have those in any kind of equal proportion that we have skeletal remains of people who lived in the Canaanite area or the Syrian area, Mesopotamian area, the Middle East from 3000 BC? I think we've got a plethora of those. If there's skeletal remains, if there was a race like this, why do we have, there's just no evidence of them existing. Now, of course, you look at Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, Australopithecus, you start going down the Darwinian chain, those are very rare. And they sometimes build up a whole stage in evolution based on one skeletal remain. And they try to...
there you go. As far as the origin of the giant race, there's 8 accounts in my book of Cro-Magnons that was around 7 foot tall. So if we want that genetic stuff that eventually the giants would come from, it is Cro-Magnon. And I said before, I said these skull types were Upper Paleolithic. They are more Cro-Magnon than they would be considered modern. And so we do have a link with that. Actually, we have a better link with the Cro-Magnon, which is what the skull types of these Amorites match up with, because there's numerous reports of them being over 6 foot and more around 7 foot. But we know that they were very tall. So there is skeletal evidence. The skeletal evidence says that they weren't modern, they were more Upper Paleolithic. So I go into that and can show you that this idea that mysteriously 10,000 BC Cro-Magnon ceased to exist is just another one of the fables that is being perpetuated by academic idiots.
Oh, there we go. We're all idiots now.
I've seen epipaleolithic ruins in Silsila, and they look like they were much smaller than us. But look, Fritz, it's a big topic, obviously, and it can get heated because we talk about it, and there's obvious paradigms we're talking about, the kind of things we bring to the table, and we argue them, and we criticize them, and so on. But we've got to leave it at that because we're at the end of the show. Can you give people an idea where they can go pick up your book so they can read what you put there and see the evidence that you're presenting?
Yeah, it's on best place, go to Amazon. Nephilim Chronicles, Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley. And if you want to go to the sites, Nephilim Chronicles, a travel guide to the ancient ruins in the Ohio Valley. All
right, fantastic. Fritz, thank you for being with us tonight, and thank you for being on the hot seat a little bit. Folks, if you want to get his book, The Nephilim Chronicles, go to Amazon.com. You can pick it up there and see what he has to say. Look at his evidence. Go join his Facebook. See some of his posts there, too. Thank you, Fritz, for being on with us.
All right. Have a good
night. All right. Have
Fritz.
a good night.
Thank you, Fritz. Take it easy, man.
All right, folks. As you can tell, these are issues that when you start challenging someone's dogma, and I believe some of this becomes dogma, and this is something I wrote about in some of my books, in the Nephilim and the reptilians, as I write about these things as becoming almost theological dogma for some people, and it's very hard for people to withstand the argument. Go ahead, John.
But there are two different ways of looking at this. There is the theological point of view, which is to do with Genesis, to do with Scripture, and you keep it within those confines. When you take it out of the confines of Scripture and start trying to bring it into the archaeological world, you've then got to try and base it with archaeological evidence. And if it doesn't stand up, it then becomes theory. It becomes hypothesis. You cannot call it fact. And then you can't start to label the academia and say that we're suppressing stuff when you're using our information, our research, our results to write your bloody book.
Well,
Please.
there it is.
I mean, man.
It's tough to get somebody to come on and present their case when you have a very different view of how these things work. Let's leave it at that. I'm glad he came on and talked about it. I'm glad that you had to say what you had to say. I think the best thing to do is to continue to study and research. It's like John and I have said about anything that we've written together, the things that John writes is it's another apple on the cart. And every time you stick the shovel or the trowel into the sand, you're upturning something that could upturn what we know historically.
Do you know what I like, though? You know what I
yes.
like about our show?
What do you like?
What I love about our show is that over the past year and a bit, that we've been able to progress to the part where we can actually question our guests, and we're not afraid to question them, and that we don't play or toe the line and pander to the kind of sensationalism that they're trying to put out there to earn that buck from the audience. And as we've said before, we all have a responsibility, because we do have a responsibility to put the information and the material out there in whatever form and format that may be.
Well, I will give him this, and let me say this in defense of the guest, is that I believe that he believes what he's saying. But here's a solid case where belief does not always trump academics. You have to look at the facts of something. We cannot be driven by our desire for something to be so in order to make it so. We've run into those types. You know, you've got people who rewrite the whole chronology of the Egyptian kings so it fits their theory. And, you know, oh, oops, did I cross a line?
Oops.
But that's what happens because people have pet peeves and people want to keep them. Now, perhaps Fritz is onto something when he says, and Fritz isn't the only one that says this, that there is an academic cover-up of some sorts. Not by every academic that exists out there, but in certain circles. And, you know, well, there it is.
Let's continue this conversation, because I want to continue it, because I'd like to discuss some of the stuff he did bring up, which I think has a lot of relevance. But we'll bring that up in the Situation Room on Thursday at 3 p.m.
I think we will. And folks, we want to thank you for joining us. We're at the end of the show tonight. I think John is happy. He had to remove his cravat tonight. So we want to thank you for being here. We'll be back here next week at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time with the Situation Room. I'm sorry, that's on Thursday, the Situation Room at 3 p.m. See, look, I got myself all flustered. Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, the Situation Room. And we'll be talking about this a little bit more. And next Sunday night, we have Ernesto Ortiz, a very different take. And let me just say this. It's going to be a peaceful show next week. It's going to be very new age. And so we want you to enjoy it and settle back.
Is this where the Stardust comes in?
Yes, Stardust. This is where it comes. May the Pleiades bless you. May Hapu bless you. And John, say goodnight.
Say goodnight, John.
Good night, John.
Good night, Scotty. I love you.
And I love you too, brother.
I love you. Candy cane.
Oh, I love you like a brother.
I love you.
Let me go pull some hairs off my chest.
I'm going to go and put my necro pants on there.
There, you go do that. See you, folks. Thanks for joining us.
See you.
And I hope that you remember